Dick Stottler, Dick-Stottler.
And talk a little bit about what is your title, first off? What would you like to
My title is President
of?
Stottler Henke Associates, and although my name is in the company name, we are an employee-owned company, an ESOP company. So everybody you see who's the Stottler Henke employee owns more of the company than I do.
Gotcha. Talk a little bit about, I remember we were talking off camera, a little bit about your history. I'm kind of fascinated with AI. You said AI has been around a lot longer than I thought it was. I thought it was 80
Sure.
years,
So,
but give me a quick history.
sure, we've been around almost 40 years, but the term artificial intelligence dates back to the mid-50s. It was coined by John McCarthy. He was the first one to use the term artificial intelligence. And back then, in the 50s and 60s, a lot of it was what I would call symbolic reasoning. The way people think when they talk out loud, the way they reason through problems. And they also, very early on, there was the first neural networks were started to be created. Those were called perceptrons, if I recall correctly, from my old AI history classes. So it's a very long science, and there's a lot of different techniques that have been developed over the course of those 70 or so years, that a lot of which have been forgotten, but not by us. So we use a lot of techniques that are no longer in fashion, but are still quite effective.
And then also, I think you told me, was it NASA that you worked for back in the
one of the first projects we got was in 1989, was to develop a scheduling system for the space shuttle, specifically to schedule all of the processing. There are multiple space shuttles, multiple overlapping missions. So the space shuttles all shared different kinds of facilities. They shared the VAB, they shared the orbital processing facility, they shared the pad, they shared the mobile launch platforms. So there was this big issue of scheduling and deconflicting all of these big, huge, multi-billion-dollar resources across the different missions. And that was all done by humans. It was very time-consuming. The main human, the main scheduler was named Tom Overton, and he was very skeptical. He said, "You'll never automate me." But by the end, he was our biggest fan, because he realized that what would take him weeks, he could do in minutes.
With the help of your guys' program?
Yeah, with our software. And again, our software very closely mimicked his processes. We spent a lot of time understanding how he did scheduling so that we could closely mimic that in software, so the software would give the same answers that he did, it just did it a lot faster.
Just in the last few years, we're hearing a lot more about AI. Has it become exponentially, and different types of AI too?
Yeah, so I think about 10 years ago was the first beginning of the sort of explosion with a lot of machine learning applications. This was things often, for classifying pictures of cats and where there's lots of data. And then that kind of grew into the large language models you hear about now, which are, very, very effective in terms of generating text based on queries, based on a lot of information. It's still, I think people attribute more sentience, maybe is the right word, to large language models than they should. They're just very complicated, in some sense, smart programs to predict the text that you want. They don't understand what they're doing. They're just spitting out text.
Do you think, is there a point in the future where you do think they'll understand? I mean, they make decisions left, right, and it's kind of hard.
Yes, but not I think in the sense that human beings know and understand things. You know what you know. You can think about what you know. And these things are just, mindlessly spitting out text. It's just very, very effective text.
Also, autonomous AI, like you were saying, I think you gave me an example of driving a rover to the edge of a crater. There's a time difference. You can't have a human decide that if it's an autonomous robot. Right?
Yeah, so for us, one of the issues you have with any machine learning application, including large language models, is they're not always right. And if, A, 90% is good enough, or B, some human's going to look at the answer and fix it, then that's absolutely fine. You should never have large language models generate some, essay and then just turn it in, right? You have to read it and fix it and proof it. Lawyers are getting in a lot of trouble lately because their cases have cited hallucinated cases that don't really exist. You have to check its work. But if there's not a chance for there to be human in the work, it's just not, and 90% is not good enough, then it's not an appropriate technology. So for us, we are involved in a lot of applications that have to be perfect. They have to be 100% perfect, and a lot of times there can't be a human in that loop. And one example is something like a lunar rover, where there's not time for a signal to go back and forth to the Earth for a human to look at it, interpret it, and quickly make a decision and have that come back. The system has to autonomously make good decisions. So we've been working with a company called Astrobotic, who builds moon rovers. One of the interesting projects they had was a system they call the Volt, which is a rover with a 60-foot deployable mast. It's a solar array meant to function at the South Pole. So if you're at the South Pole of the moon, where they want to have a lunar base, it makes sense to have a vertical solar array so you can see the sun kind of at the horizon. But it's very unstable, as you might imagine. Excuse me. At 60 feet in the air, and a wheelbase like a couple of feet wide, it doesn't take much to tip the whole thing over. And so if there's some issue, they need to react very quickly. And so for them, they were worried about soil collapsing under one of the wheels. There's an issue with moonquakes causing vibrations that again may cause some kind of collapse. There's not time for humans to react to that. The system has to quickly understand, looking at all the sensor data, that a collapse is happening. It's not a sensor problem, it's a real problem. Because you certainly don't want to tell the system to rebalance the array if it's just a sensor error.
Okay, wow, I've never even thought about like moonquakes and everything else.
Yeah, moonquakes are a problem.
I guess, too, in general, AI, kind of what are your thoughts? Should people be afraid of it?
So, AI is a tool like anything else. It's not going to suddenly just wake up like Skynet in the Terminator movies and decide that humanity's a threat and destroy us. But as it gets more and more powerful, that's a more and more powerful tool that human beings have available to them. So it's not so much the AI as human beings with malicious intent using the AI. And you're already seeing that, right? You're already seeing scammers. You're already seeing lots of fake video. I mean, pretty much now you can't believe anything you see anymore.
But I'm sure you're on to it when you see all this stuff.
Well, you know what?
Definitely AI.
I've always been skeptical of anything I see, right? If it's not from a reputable news source, I don't buy it.
Let's see, what was I going to ask? It slipped my mind. Anyway, like ChatGPT, all these other Grok and stuff, are they the reasons we're building all these data centers?
They largely are, yes. They take a huge amount of processing and therefore a huge amount of energy to do that machine learning on basically the vast amounts of information that's on the internet. I mean, there's more information that could be humanly imagined out there that they're being used to train on every day. And anytime there's something new, which is all the time, they have to be retrained.
I know what I was going to ask you. Like, there was a movie with Hawkins, and do you put like a kill switch in your programming? And is there like anonymous, like a backdoor way in your program if something went awry, like in war games? Is there anything that you do?
Yeah, actually there is. So
that make sure I still have control of this?
Sort of. So we have a space experiment running this summer. So we call it total autonomy. It's going to be a totally autonomous system running in space on an experimental satellite. And it's doing a lot of different things that are very complicated. It's worrying about fault detection and diagnosis. It's worrying about automatically rescheduling and replanning the observations it's taking. It's worrying about space threats, looking at them and reacting to them. It's got a fault injection and threat injection module so that if nothing bad happens, it has something to do, right? And then it's got an execution system that basically is executing all these events based on the plan and based on what's happening. But on top of that, we have what we call the execution monitor. And it's just looking for dumb stuff, right? Like is, are we executing a whole bunch of images for no good reason, right? Is there a whole bunch of faults that we suddenly are detecting? So the idea is, because again, it's completely autonomous, there's no human around, but can you come up with a simple set of things that you don't want to do? So I'll give you an example. There was a Japanese X-ray telescope in space that basically spun itself to death. And it's because one of its sensors went bad. And so it thought it wasn't moving, so it added a little torque, and it thought it wasn't moving, so it added a little more torque, thought it wasn't moving, added a little more torque, until it spun itself so much that centrifugal force just blew it apart. Whereas a high-level monitor could have just said, does it make sense to just keep adding torque? That's probably not a good idea.
Right. Oh, interesting. Are they actually making decisions, or is it all just looking at past data, like this happens, so this...
It depends on what you mean by a decision. So that was a lot of control systems are closed-loop systems. They just look at a sensor, compare it to what they want it to be, and then take some action. It's a thermostat, basically, right?
Okay.
So, but what if your thermostat broke and your furnace just kept turning up higher and higher and higher, trying to get the house warm enough because the sensor says it's 40 degrees inside your house? It's that concept that you can have control loops that go haywire because the sensors are bad. The Boeing planes that went down, it was a bad sensor.
And they also, didn't they reprogram those and then it created even more issues?
Well, it was a problem in that they were a new aircraft, and they were changing the flight control software because it was a longer aircraft, and they wanted to fly like the old one, even though the dynamics were inherently different.
All right. Is there anything else like interesting out there that people might not know about? I mean, you're kind of on the cutting edge. You see
what is
things
interesting
that are going on in outer space that I never.
Well, let's see. I told you about our in-flight space experiment. I told you about the rover.
There's probably stuff you can't talk about too.
So we do a fair amount of work for space domain awareness. I'm happy to say that we were the only organization on the planet to correctly predict a Chinese launch last November. We correctly predicted the space vehicle and the orbital regime. And we did that using a really old technology called case-based reasoning. It's the idea that people often solve current problems by remembering a past problem and taking a similar past problem, taking that solution, make it fit the current circumstances. In this case, it was, let's look at past similar launches. What were those vehicles? What were those similar launch orbital regimes? And let's just guess the same thing. But we were the only ones to do that. So that's what happens when technologies get lost, right? I mean, we remember them, but those are technologies that really should be more widely applied.
Excellent. Anything else I missed that you want to talk about? I still think people are probably most fascinated now with AI, hearing about it in the news all the time.
Yeah.
And like infrastructure being attacked, like utilities.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, well, personally, like, I don't need my power plant connected to the internet, right? Just don't, and you'd be completely invulnerable. It is very horrible to watch how many organizations, hospitals, governments are vulnerable to attack. AI is going to make that a lot worse because it makes it a lot easier to run attacks. And AI is a technology that can be used on the defensive side, but it has to be used. So people really need to up their game on their cybersecurity.